Mr. Beilin, thank you so much for speaking to us at Horizon Weekly. It's a real pleasure to be here in Tel Aviv talking to you. Armenians and the Jewish people share a very common background. Israeli historian Yair Aron calls it a common historical fate. In World War II, Franz Werfel's book 40 Days of Musadar about the Armenian Genocide inspired the Jewish resistance in the ghettos. Now, in April 2000, you were Minister of Justice in Israel, and along with Ministry of Education Yossi Sarid, you acknowledged the atrocities perpetrated by the Ottoman Turks on the Armenians as genocide. And if I'm not mistaken, it wasn't the first time that you called it as such. And now today, this question still lingers inside the Knesset, in the Israeli parliament. Why?
Because of Turkey. I mean, this is very simple. I mean, there is always this kind of deliberation whether we should acknowledge the true history or refrain from doing it because politically today the relations with Armenia are very weak and are not very positive, while Turkey, who is led by a very strange guy, is a very strong and important country for Israel, an Islamic country. So here is the deliberation. I mean, when I appeared first in the Knesset, as I was the Deputy Foreign Minister in '94, on the 27th of April, I also quoted the Franz Werfel book, which was published in '33. And because as a child I read it, even if it was not a book of history, I mean, it is not that it is one-to-one, the facts and the reality, but it was born out of this horrible reality of 15, and yes, I mean, it was very, very genuine for me just to say, as a result of a question hour in the Knesset, when I was asked about what happened in Armenia. I mean, it was genocide. I mean, we have to admit it. I mean, you can say it was already so many years ago, and now there is another Turkey, and we can refer to it in a very different way, as there is another Germany, and we refer to Germany in another way. But not to admit that it was a genocide. It was the Holocaust of the Armenian people. And the suffering is the common denominator that you are referring to. Each nation has its own suffering, but it was a huge suffering. And we should be the last not to admit it or to somehow turn our back to it and say, no, it was not a genocide, you know. 1.5 million people were killed in this around 1915. Because the Turks did not want the Armenians to be too close to the border. This was the logic, so-called the crazy logic behind it. And I think that if we do not recognize events like that, it would be easier to, God forbid, repeat them. That is the point. We have to refer to those events in history, and there are not too many of them, in which you spoke about a genocide, and you must educate people and do whatever you can in order to prevent the repetition. And if you say, well, 1.5 million people were killed or died in the course of the atrocities of the Turks, but this was not a genocide. So what was it? Massacre. It was not exactly a massacre, because a massacre is happening in a relatively short time. I mean, if I speak about a scientific definition, and many people are killed during those days. Here it was a much longer process. So it was not a massacre, but it was a genocide. Armenians were killed because they were Armenians and because the Turks did not trust them and saw them as kind of traitors or potential traitors. That what happened exactly in 1915. And people should know, younger generations, that it was a Holocaust, it was a genocide, and should never repeat itself. And in a way, and that was what Franz Werfel thought about when he wrote the 40 Days of Musa Dag, that the Armenian Holocaust was kind of a conducive event to the Jewish Holocaust, because the world saw that something like this is happening without a comment.
You yourself, you grew up in Israel. When was the first time that you heard about the Armenian genocide?
When I was 8 years old, I read the Franz Werfel book. And I was horrified by it. I already knew about the Holocaust, although they didn't teach about the Jewish Holocaust in those days. There were no books. It was too early. It was not that we knew the story of the Holocaust. And for sure we did not know through school the story of the Armenian Holocaust. But here, the Franz Werfel did a lot by publishing his very, very unique book.
Would you say that Israel has used the Armenian question as a tool to challenge Turkey whenever it feels threatened?
I suggested, for one, when there was a deterioration, to use this opportunity in order to recognize the Armenian Holocaust, not because just to irritate the Turks, but in order to do justice. And I can understand as a pragmatic politician that sometimes you don't want, if you know that there is a very, very delicate point, you don't want to provoke the other side if you have good relations with this side. And Turkey is, as I said, very, very important for us.
Strategic.
First of all, as a big Islamic state, which has diplomatic relations with Israel, and had it before the peace with Jordan and Egypt.
Not just Turkey, but also Azerbaijan, right? Azerbaijan is another Islamic state that has...
Yeah, but first of all, you are right. Azerbaijan is very important for us. Kazakhstan is important for us. But the point is that Turkey is playing an international role, while the others are much more silent and much more regional. Turkey is a regional superpower and a player in the international arena. And that is why we were not ready to recognize the Armenian Holocaust, and it is a shame.
So what do you think that it will take Israel, now with Bennett's new government, to accept and to acknowledge 1915 as genocide?
It is difficult to anticipate it. For sure, if we recognize the Armenian genocide, Turkey will call back the ambassador, as he did with the French ambassador a few years ago, and things like that. So, there will be a kind of a suspension of the diplomatic relations. The question is for how long? And the truth is that there is no hurry. Bennett is not under any pressure to recognize the Armenian disaster. So why should he, especially now, prevent the positive development with Turkey, when on the other side, Armenia is not a friend of Israel necessarily, and there is no pressure to recognize the Holocaust.
And Yossi, is there anything that you want to tell our Armenian audience?
What I can say is that I'm sorry for the fact that Israel is not in a hurry to recognize the historic truth of this genocide in 15. I don't believe that Turkey is right in fighting against it, because it is not the same people, that it's not the same Turks. It is another regime, and they could easily say that the old regime might have some reasons to do things, but not things like that, and that they are very, very sorry for what happened, and whatever. It is so humane to say something like this, that I'm astonished that something which is so clear in its facts became so controversial, and that the Turkey is still persecuting those who admit what really happened. So I hope that in the future there will be a change. And I also hope that the relations between Israel and Armenia will change to the better, because when these relationships are better, then the background for a change in the recognition, although it shouldn't be connected, but it is connected, then it will be more difficult to not to admit the genocide of 15.
Thank you so much.